My name is Jillian Strickland. Most people used to call me Jill before they forgot I existed. Before my name was quietly erased from plaques, newsletters, alumni spotlights. Before my own sister started telling people I dropped out to find myself in the desert. That's not what happened, but that's the version they liked. The quieter I became, the louder they rewrote me. I hadn't set foot in Fairhill since graduation day 20 years ago. But tonight I returned, for the class reunion they made sound like royalty. The invitation had gold trim and phrases like legacy and powerhouse class of 2004. My name was on the list, printed in the same bland font as the others. No title, no rank, no history. I wore a navy sheath dress, simple, unassuming, the same one I wore the day I briefed NATO command in Brussels, under a uniform no one here would ever see. The valet didn't look at me twice. The girl at the check-in desk smiled and asked if I was someone's guest. Inside, the ballroom was glittering and loud, all curated nostalgia and curated people. On stage, my younger sister Rachel beamed in a crimson dress, her voice polished and confident as she announced her new role at the Department of Justice. The crowd roared when she name-dropped the White House. Then she said, "And I couldn't have made it without my sister Jill, who taught me how to be unique." The laughter that followed was warm and cruel at the same time. I didn't flinch. I just took the name tag from the table, plain white sticker, no honorifics, and walked to the back. Table 19, near the emergency exit. I wasn't here to impress anyone, but by the end of the night, they would remember exactly who I was. Table 19 was exactly what I expected, wedged between the buffet and the hallway to the restrooms. No floral centerpiece, no name cards in gold foil, just a stack of cocktail napkins damp with condensation, and a half-eaten shrimp cocktail that someone abandoned. I slid into the seat without a sound and folded the name tag into my clutch. No point pretending anyone cared what it said. Across the room, the success crowd clustered like magnets. CEOs, startup darlings, a senator with too much makeup and not enough grace. Rachel stood at the center of it all, laughing easily, shaking hands, being admired. She'd always been brilliant at performance. Even as kids, she knew when to cry, when to shine, and exactly when to make me feel like a shadow. I poured myself a glass of water, hands steady. Until I saw Jason. Jason Langley had barely aged. Still tall, still smug, still carrying himself like a man who thought charm was currency and everyone else was in debt. He spotted me and made his way over, 2 drinks in hand, like we were back in senior year and the world still revolved around him. "Well, if it isn't Jill Strickland," he said, flashing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "You still stationed out in the desert? Or did you retire to paperwork in Kansas?" I smiled politely. "Good to see you too, Jason." "I'm kidding," he chuckled. "But seriously, didn't you study law? What happened?" Before I could answer, a woman in pearls leaned over and whispered, just loud enough, "Didn't she drop out of law school? Shame, she had so much promise." I didn't correct her. I didn't explain that I never dropped out. I transferred. I enlisted. I trained. I chose a path none of them could fathom. And I excelled. But silence was a habit now, almost muscle memory. Rachel floated over not long after, all theatrics and toothy smiles. "Oh, Jill," she purred. "I almost didn't recognize you in that dress. Vintage?" "It's just a dress," I replied. She tilted her head. "Well, you've always been practical." I said nothing. She leaned in, mock conspiratorial. "You really should share your stories sometime. I bet you have a few good ones, right?" "Only the quiet kind," I said, then turned away. The rest of the table filled up with familiar faces. Familiar, but not warm. I sat through dinner unnoticed, invisible in plain sight. They didn't ask where I'd been, what I'd done, why I never showed up in the alumni magazine, because they had already decided I didn't matter. But the truth? I'd commanded rooms they'd never be allowed to enter. I'd held decisions in my hands that shaped borders and saved lives. And now I was sitting beside a tray of scalloped potatoes, being mistaken for someone who disappeared. They didn't know how wrong they were. I stepped out onto the side balcony just before dessert was served. The noise of clinking glasses and polished anecdotes faded behind the thick French doors. Out here, the air was cooler, crisper. The treetops swayed in the dark, lit faintly by the glow spilling out from the ballroom windows. It was the first moment all evening I could breathe. That's when my encrypted phone buzzed. Just once. No ringtone, no screen flash. But I felt it through the lining of my clutch. Coded vibration pattern 3. Priority breach review. I slipped the device out, thumbprint scan, iris check, voice confirm. Strickland, clearance Echo 5. The screen lit up. 4 threat vectors active, 1 critical. Target, Operation Artemis. Internal leak suspected. NATO flagged. I stared at the map overlay, watching as red zones pulsed along the eastern digital corridor. One of them was blinking faster than the others. I tapped the prompt. Immediate advisory requested. Pentagon standby. Extraction possible. Confirm if operational. I didn't respond yet, not until I knew what I was walking back into. Behind me, I heard the door creak open. Jason. "There you are," he said, slurring slightly. "You always did like standing alone." I didn't answer. He leaned beside me on the railing, too close. "You know," he began, voice lowering, "you could have been something big. You were valedictorian, debate captain, Harvard practically begging, and then, poof. Army?" I looked at him calmly. "I didn't disappear, Jason. I just stopped explaining myself." He laughed once, too sharp. "You always liked riddles." I turned to leave, but he caught my wrist lightly. "Jill, I didn't mean—" "You never mean it," I said, "but you always say it." Rachel appeared in the doorway, dramatic as ever, looping her arm through his. "Oh, there you are. We're doing the golden trio photo. Come on, me, Jason, and the girl who vanished." She looked at me and smiled, voice too sweet. "Still out in the heat somewhere, sis?" "I'm in transition," I replied. Her eyes narrowed. "Not out of work, I hope." "I manage," I said. "Just not from behind podiums." She clucked her tongue. "Always so mysterious. But I guess not everyone wants the spotlight." She tugged Jason back inside like a prop. I stayed behind, gripping the balcony railing, letting the wind cool the tightness in my chest. They didn't know. They'd never know. I'd walked into classified bunkers beneath mountains, briefed NATO generals in 5 languages, and authorized black ops that changed the shape of continents. But out here, I was just Rachel's awkward sister in a discount dress. My phone buzzed again. This time, different code. Extraction cleared. Helipad ETA, 6 minutes. I looked up at the stars. Somewhere above me, blades were already spinning. They were about to learn who I really was. The music had shifted inside, something jazzy and over-rehearsed, when the ground began to tremble. Just slightly at first. A low hum threaded the air, then grew louder, deeper. Not thunder, not wind. They didn't recognize the sound at first. But I did. The noise built until even those inside started glancing toward the windows. Waiters froze mid-step. A few guests looked up from their phones. Someone laughed nervously. Then the lights on the lawn flickered. Wine glasses rattled on tabletops. Rachel, halfway through a toast, paused. Her voice cracked. "What is that?" The sound cracked open the night. Leaves ripped from branches. Napkins lifted off plates. Guests spilled out toward the terrace, shielding their eyes from the blinding floodlights now sweeping over the grounds. From the northern tree line, it emerged, black, angular, slicing the air like a blade. A military helicopter, matte-coated and roaring. It hovered for a second, its presence consuming the lawn, then began to descend. People screamed. Phones rose like a field of blinking stars. Someone dropped a tray of crème brûlée. The moment the wheels touched grass, the side door slid open. Out stepped Colonel Patrick Adams, full dress uniform, silver insignia glinting in the storm of light. He walked with practiced pace, his boots crunching over gravel and grass. He did not glance at the crowd. His eyes locked on me. I stepped forward, alone. The wind tugged at my hair, my hem, but I stood straight. Colonel Adams stopped 3 feet from me, squared his shoulders, and saluted. Sharp, crisp, deliberate. Then, in a voice that cut through every gasp and whisper, he announced, "Lieutenant General Strickland, ma'am, the Pentagon requires your immediate presence." The silence was seismic. Someone dropped a glass. A child clutched their mother's leg. Jason's mouth fell open. Rachel stumbled. Her heel snapped, sending her lurching sideways as she clutched her champagne glass like a lifeline. "Wait, what?" she stammered. "General?" I met her eyes, calm and unshaken. "I thought you said I was peeling potatoes in Kansas," I said evenly. Jason stepped forward, face pale. "Jill, I didn't know. I swear I didn't—" "You didn't ask," I said. "You never have." Melissa, standing off to the side, whispered softly, "Oh my God! Jill!" Adams handed me a sealed folder, black, thick, marked only with gold bars. He leaned in, voice low. "Target movement confirmed. Project Artemis may already be compromised." I nodded once. "Any casualties?" "None yet," he said. "But it won't hold." Rachel's voice cracked from the crowd. "You're in the military? Since when?" I looked at her. "Since before your first campaign donation." And then to the crowd, "Some people wear uniforms you can see. Some of us wear them in silence. Doesn't make them any less earned." Colonel Adams gave a sharp nod toward the aircraft. "Ma'am, wheels up in one." I turned toward the roar, toward the floodlights, and the war waiting behind them. And I left them all standing in the wreckage of their assumptions. By the time the helicopter touched down at Fort Arlington, the internet had already detonated. Photos of the extraction flooded social media. Someone posted a slow-motion clip of Colonel Adams saluting me, overlaid with dramatic music. Another captured Rachel's frozen face as my title was spoken aloud. The caption read, "That moment you realize your sister outranks your entire narrative." But the real blow came 12 hours later. Rachel's podcast, her polished, well-sponsored, truth-adjacent podcast, released a special emergency episode titled, "My Sister the Myth." The thumbnail was a stylized silhouette of a woman in uniform, face obscured. In it, she spoke in soft, level tones. Compassionate. Concerned. "I want to talk today," she began, "about how power can be weaponized in the most subtle ways, about how some people choose silence, not out of humility, but to create mystique, about what happens when narrative becomes performance." She never said my name, but she didn't have to. The damage was done. By morning, I had over 80 missed calls, 100 media inquiries, and an inbox overflowing with everything from praise to death threats. TikTok edits labeled me a fraud. Twitter threads dissected my military record, claiming I'd staged the reunion scene for clout. A headline from a fringe blog read, "General or actor, deep state cosplay goes viral." At 6:00 a.m., I walked into the Pentagon's Cyber Defense Division wearing full blues. Colonel Adams met me at the skiff door with a grim nod. "You're trending," he said. "I noticed." He handed me a secure tablet. "Merlin's breach pattern just jumped. Someone's piggybacking civilian chatter to access Tier 3 comms. We think your name is the entry vector." "They're using me?" He nodded. "The podcast clip is being spliced into foreign disinformation campaigns. You just became a narrative asset, whether you like it or not." In the briefing room, I stood before a wall of red maps and data pulses, watching as the system pulsed with conflict. This wasn't just about me anymore. It never was. Later that afternoon, Jason showed up at the Pentagon. He waited in the civilian lobby with a paper folder clutched in both hands like it held a confession. "I didn't come to apologize," he said when I met him. "I came to admit I stood by while she erased you." I said nothing. "Right after you enlisted," he continued, "Rachel told the alumni board you wanted to be removed from the honors list, that you didn't want recognition." He looked ashamed. She forwarded a fake email chain. I didn't question it. I thought maybe you really did want to disappear. I turned away, jaw tight. And now? I know better. And so does Melissa. That night, Melissa came to my quarters carrying a manila envelope. We found it, she said. Your Medal of Honor nomination file. From 2018. My breath caught. I thought the board dropped it. They did, she said, because Rachel told them you withdrew consent. She handed me the printed email, DOJ letterhead, Rachel's signature. General Strickland has expressed a strong preference for anonymity. Please suspend the nomination process indefinitely. My hands trembled, but I didn't drop the page. She told the board you didn't want it, Melissa whispered, that you didn't need it, and they believed her. My voice was hoarse. She didn't just silence me. She rewrote me. Melissa nodded. But now, you write it back. The next morning, I requested 3 minutes at the upcoming Alumni Legacy event, one Rachel was scheduled to host. The board hesitated. Then they approved it. When I walked on stage in uniform, I wasn't there for revenge. I was there for restoration. I held up the photo Melissa had found, me in dress blues, saluting beside General Claire Aubrey at NATO Command. I displayed the commendations, the operational briefings, the nomination paperwork. Then I spoke. My name is Lieutenant General Jillian R. Strickland, class of 2004. I was voted most likely to become a professor. That prediction didn't quite land. Soft laughter rippled, hesitant. I chose service over ceremony, silence over spotlight, and for that, I was erased. I paused, let the words breathe. But silence isn't shame, and invisibility isn't absence. Some of us serve where no cameras reach, and return not for applause, but because truth deserves a voice. When I stepped down, no one clapped at first, then a single pair of hands, then more. Then the room rose, not in thunder, but in reverence. The Medal of Honor ceremony took place on a cloudless morning, under the white canopy of the South Lawn. Rows of uniforms stretched out before me, crisp and symmetrical. Cadets, generals, cabinet officials, families, journalists. Somewhere in the third row, Melissa sat beside my old history teacher, both in quiet awe. And a few seats down, Rachel, expression unreadable, back straight, pearl earrings glinting in the sun. I stood at attention in full dress blues, gloves white, every ribbon aligned with decades of silence. The president stepped to the podium, his voice calm and measured. Today, he said, we honor not just an officer, but a sentinel. A woman who carried the burden of command not through speeches or spectacle, but through resolve. Lieutenant General Jillian Strickland served in the shadows, so the rest of us didn't have to. He turned to me, lifted the ribbon from the case, and with deliberate care, placed it around my neck. The medal rested against my chest like an anchor, or a release. I exhaled, fully, tranquille. There was no thunderous ovation, no dramatic music, just a steady applause that filled the air with something deeper than celebration, recognition, real, earned, irreversible. When it was over, I stepped aside from the crowd, past the rows of flashing cameras, into the shade of a nearby elm. Rachel found me there. She didn't say anything right away, just stood beside me in silence, her heels sinking slightly into the grass. Then she handed me something small. A photo, old and folded. 2 girls in camo Halloween costumes, saluting, one grinning wide. The other, me, stone-faced, serious even at 8. You kept this? I asked quietly. I almost threw it out. Twice, she said. But I couldn't. I looked at her then, not the polished speaker, not the podcast host, just my sister, tired, stripped of theater. I wanted the world to see me, she said. But I think I wanted it to see me through you. And when you disappeared, I panicked. I thought if I outshone you, maybe I'd matter more. You didn't need to erase me to be seen, I said. Her voice cracked. I know that now. She looked away, then back. You were always the one who showed up when no one was looking. I just didn't understand how loud that kind of presence could be. We stood there a while. No apologies, no full forgiveness. Just the quiet possibility of a new truth, less perfect, more human. Weeks later, I declined the West Wing advisory post they offered. I chose instead a lecture hall at Fort Lockwood, a small military academy in Virginia. My classroom wasn't impressive. Beige walls, scratched desks, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, but the cadets were sharp, eager, raw, exactly the kind of minds I wanted to shape. Our first seminar, Ethical Command in Invisible Warfare. A red-haired cadet raised her hand. "Ma'am," she asked, "what do you do when the story about you isn't yours anymore?" I smiled. "You tell it back, not louder, just clearer. And longer." The class nodded. They understood. One day, Rachel visited the base. No makeup, jeans, a camera slung over her shoulder. "I'm producing a docuseries now," she said. "Women in Command. I want to start with the one I misunderstood most." I raised a brow. "Trying for atonement?" She shrugged. "Trying for accuracy." We sat for one interview, then another, then a third. Not as sisters, as women unraveling the cost of power, visibility, and silence. When the first episode aired, it opened not with music or voiceover, but with an image of that Halloween photo. The caption read, "Before the world saw her, she already carried it." Months passed. One quiet morning, I returned to my old high school for an alumni event. In the hallway near the main office, a new plaque had been installed. Lieutenant General Gillian R. Strickland, Integrity and Silence. I stood before it alone, not seeking validation, just presence. Because sometimes the loudest legacy isn't the one with medals or microphones. It's the one carved into memory, earned, not demanded. And finally, seen.